Let me start by acknowledging the thumbnail that I just took. My cat is sitting in my lap, so her tail's in it, trying to figure out, like, how do I do a thumbnail for a video about podcasts? Apparently that's how. Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Brienne Beebe. I'm a high school math teacher and a lover of professional development. So today I wanted to share my top 5 favorite teaching podcasts, because a podcast for teachers, it's like professional development on the go that you get to choose, and it's free. Now, I also love to listen to business-focused podcasts because I run like a small business with my Teachers Pay Teachers store, and I have a video on those podcasts coming up as well, but I like to alternate between listening to a business podcast and a teacher podcast. Depending on my mood on the way to school, I like to listen to teacher podcasts because they help me just get into a good frame of mind before going into school. Even if the podcast that I'm listening to has nothing to do with anything that might be troubling me about school, it just puts me in like a problem-solving mindset. So I always end up feeling better. So the first podcast I'm going to mention, in complete honesty, I've not listened to this podcast in a long time. My phone's asking me if I want to continue downloading, and I'm just like, yes. But I haven't listened to an episode in a while, and I think it's just because of business podcasts kind of getting in the way. But the fact that I haven't listened to it in a while and still call it one of my favorites really means something. So it's Always a Lesson, and the podcast is just very, I don't want to say like inspirational, but I don't think there's a better word for it. It's just very like relaxed and simple and to the point, and it's encouraging. That's the word that I was looking for. It's very encouraging to listen to. I need to make it a regular thing, and the episodes are really short. I think that's probably the reason why I haven't listened to it in a while, because my commute is like 25 minutes long, so I'm looking for 25-minute long podcasts. The next podcast that I'd consider a favorite is the Cult of Pedagogy podcast. This one I love. Have you ever been to the website Cult of Pedagogy? We get links to that website, or at least we used to, all the time from our instructional coach. And it's always really good stuff, and I just really trust the source. So I like listening to that podcast. It sounds a little bit more like professional development, and it feels a little bit more targeted toward those topics. But if I'm looking for more information about an educational topic, that's my first place to look. My next favorite podcast is Healthy Teacher, Happy Teacher. This is from the Whimsical Teacher on Instagram. So if you follow her but haven't listened to this podcast yet, you need to listen to the podcast. She's very endearing as a person. So on Instagram, you're getting these 15-second stories that, maybe string together into a longer story. I love listening to her longer stories on the podcast. I also find this podcast to be very encouraging, and the focus isn't so much on classroom topics, but on teacher health and wellness, which is something that I'm always interested in hearing more about. So I love listening to this podcast. This next podcast is brand new, so keep that in mind. For me to declare this a favorite after the first episode, but there's 2 episodes now, after 2 episodes, I feel like that speaks volumes. So this podcast is called Teaching to the Top. It's by Michelle and Bridget from Pocketful of Primary and The Lettered Classroom. So if you know these ladies from YouTube, then you know that excellence is their minimum standard, and I love that so much. Like, that's something I really relate to, and their podcast is like perfection. So TOP is meant to be an acronym that stands for timely, organized, and productive. I might be a little bit off on the words, but that's essentially what it's about. And so it's a podcast for teachers about being organized. I'm so there. I love it. So that brings us to my all-time absolute favorite teacher podcast ever, and that would be Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. This was the very first podcast that I'd ever listened to. I still to this day do not know how I landed there, but I started listening to it summer of 2016, and the 2015-2016 school year was the year that I was suffering from teacher burnout, and I pulled myself out of it in May, and I think it was mostly the promise of a new school year, but having this podcast as a resource helped me tremendously. So that's why it's a favorite, and it does not disappoint. And Angela Watson is someone that I just consider to be an expert and very knowledgeable. So I love hearing what she has to say about current topics in education. So on this podcast, Angela covers everything teacher related, from just tips for classroom management or organization, all the way to current trends in education, and she tackles the tougher topics, and I think it's just fantastic all around. She also talks about teacher health and wellness. She is the woman that put together the 40-hour teacher workweek club, which is something that I cannot say enough good things about. I'll leave my review of it in the comments, not in the comment, in the description. She is the woman behind the 40-hour teacher workweek club, which has changed my life. I will leave my review of it in the description box. And I just could not say enough good things about Angela Watson and this podcast. So those are my top 5 favorite teacher podcasts. All of them will be linked in the description box below. And in the comments, let me know what is your favorite teacher podcast. And as always, thanks for watching.